All right, now it is your time to shine. We are talking about 5E Explained, the direct instruction portion of a 5E lesson. All right, so today we're going to talk about the 3 must-haves for a successful Explained 5E model or lesson. And I'm Blair, the face behind Aloha Monday Teaching, if we have not met yet. And we've been talking about 5E last video, the last 2 videos. So I shared about, let's just recap really quick. We've compared Madeline Hunter and 5E, which they're very similar. It's just the orders are a little bit different. And then we talked about hooks or the engage step in a 5E lesson. And we also talked about explore and some activities that students can do during that time to gain knowledge before you reach this step explained. And I've linked everything below, all the blog post videos, so that you can check them out. All right, let's get started. So here are the 3 must-haves that you should have during explain. Obviously, the direct instruction, because that is what this portion is all about. You must have brain breaks and processing time, and you must also check for understanding. So we will go more into detail with each of these. So during your direct instruction, you're up there, you're teaching, you probably have some kind of PowerPoint made, videos prepared, notes for the kids, textbooks, all of those things. So you want to incorporate a lot of visuals, the text, and you'll want to chunk your material for students to process it. Vocabulary instruction will happen during this time and give examples of vocabulary, use them in context. Students should also be taking notes during this time, and there's a lot of different ways you can have them take notes. You can have them, well, for some students, like you might have to modify your notes by giving them a paper with closed notes and they fill in the blanks. That's one way you can do notes. You can also show them what to write down. Some teachers like to use Cornell notes. You can have them just write down whatever they think is important, or have them write down diagrams, all of that stuff. And you'll label diagrams during this time, so that would be part of the note taking. So explain can take, so I'm going to give you 3 tips today also. So tip number 1, explain can take 1 or 2 days. It just depends on what you're teaching your students. But I think it's important that students are not sitting the whole entire period. So if your class is an hour long, maybe break up the period in half, or at least like 40-20, like 40 minutes, 20 minutes. And that way students aren't sitting the whole period. So you could have the first part of class is note taking, and the second part is they're practicing what you taught them. Or if you have to just take the whole period and teach, which is fine too, it's not a terrible thing to do. But if it just takes one day, you want to knock out all the notes, be sure to include brain breaks, which is what we're talking about next. So it is important for students to have these brain breaks and time to process the information that you are teaching them. Neuroscientists recommend that middle schoolers receive 12 to 20 minutes of direct instruction and then some kind of break to process the information. So it doesn't need to be like, they stand up and dance and do all that. It doesn't have to be that kind of brain break. Honestly, that's not the kind of brain breaks I like to do. I like to incorporate brain breaks that are related to what I'm teaching them. But whatever brain break you choose, just that time, that break they get from the direct instruction gives their brains a chance to like, okay, let's sort this information out. While the kids are doing some kind of brain break, their brains are trying to connect, make those links, and that way it helps them learn. So tip number 2 is doing simple brain breaks. I like to keep things simple. So you could have students sketch. They can sketch what they learned. They can just have them sketch anything. Their brains are still working. They can write a quick summary. They can discuss with a partner. I like to do one called air writing, where they stand up and in the air we write vocab words, or I'll ask a question and they write their answer in the air. They can also just simply stand up to discuss and share what they're learning. And just that movement gets them out of their seats. And it's like, it's a nice little brain break for them. There's also those cross body movements where it helps their brains too. So where the right and the left, that sort of thing. All right. And the third thing that you must have during explain is check for understanding. So you need to know where your students are while you're teaching them, so if you need to slow down, or like, oh wow, they're getting it, I can go a little bit faster, I can jump ahead, or whatever the case is. So you can just ask students a question and then have them respond. So I'll do, okay, stand up if you know this, and then I can tell how many kids know it. You can use whiteboards. I like to use dry erase. I'll show you. I like to use these dry erase pockets as my whiteboards because the kids kind of destroyed other whiteboards, but I'll put a piece of white paper in the dry erase pocket and that becomes their whiteboard. So I'll pass these out when we do whiteboard type of review with a marker. You can fit everything like inside of the pocket. You can put the marker in there with a little eraser, however you choose to do it. So that's one way you can do it, and they hold up their whiteboards. Or you can do something so simple. Thumbs up, I got it. Thumbs to the side, I almost have it, kind of do. I have questions. Thumbs down, I have no idea what you are talking about, Mrs. Strongoli. So that is probably the simplest way to do it. And it's really quick, and you can see, okay, most kids are getting it, and then kind of make a mental note which kids are like this especially. But if they're thumbs to the side, just kind of maybe review it, talk about it in a different way, or have the kids discuss with each other and see if somebody else's explanation can help this student move from here to a thumbs up. So those are just some strategies for that. So tip number 3, to check for understanding, like let's say you know how it is when you're teaching and you're like so into it that you just keep going and going and going. Yeah, I get that way a lot because I get really excited to talk about what I'm teaching. But sometimes I forget like to do a brain break, or sometimes I forget to ask them a question and check for understanding. So here's my tip. This has helped me tremendously. Be intentional by adding a check for understanding or even a brain break slide in your slideshow, and just do it every few slides. And that way it's like, okay, show me what you know, or, thumbs up if you got it. And that way it's there built in. You don't start losing track of time and like 20 minutes goes by. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if my students know what I'm talking about. So that is my tip for being intentional, is to add these slides to your slideshow. And if you're not using a slideshow, put sticky notes in your book or whatever you're teaching from, or write it out in your lesson plan, whatever it is that you use, have it so that it's there so you don't forget. All right, so let's wrap this up. We talked about for a 5E explain lesson, the 3 things that you must have. Direct instruction, where you're teaching your students and using different ways of showing them the information through text, through images and videos, and also by chunking the information. We talked about brain breaks and processing time, and that students need about every 12 to 20 minutes. So every 3 to 5 slides, have some sort of, give them a moment, a minute or 2 to process the information, to get a little brain break, to stand up. And that way their brains are making those connections. And also the third thing we talked about was check for understanding while you're teaching. And that way if students are understanding the information you're giving them, if you need to slow down, if you need to just show them in a different way, or if your kids are ready and it's time to just move a little ahead. So it's your turn. During your direct instruction or your teacher-led instruction, what will you add to your next lesson so that your students are processing the information and understanding the concept? Please share in the comments below, and check out these videos all about lesson planning or engaging your students.